And do we have the commission on the line?
I'm here.
All right, so Ms. Blackwelder, are you on the line?
Larry, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Is this Ms. Blackwelder?
Yes, I need somebody to send me the link. I can't get into the Zoom meeting and I don't see it on the page, on the town page.
Okay.
I'll keep looking. Is Fran there or Holly?
Larry, I'll send something over to Lori.
Yeah.
Or Fran might too, but we'll try.
It's on the agenda, Lori.
I know, I'm clicking my, my page from Fran and it's not clicking, and I can probably type it in. It'll just take a minute.
Yeah, the meeting ID, Lori, is 869-755-7180.
Okay. All right, I'll be on in a minute.
Okay.
I can hear though, obviously.
Okay, I saw Jeff there a second ago. Kathleen, are you on the line?
I think she's muted.
So is Commissioner Greengold, are you on the line?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we have all but Ms. Perrault on the line.
She was there a minute ago. I just saw her a minute ago.
All right, well,
I'm
I'm
here.
going to call the meeting to order. It's 4 minutes after 7.
Can anybody hear me? This is Fran, I'm here.
Yeah, we hear you, Fran.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Fabulous.
All right, first item on the on our plan this evening is to approve the agenda. I understand there'll be some amendments to that, but do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I have a question, Larry.
Can we get a motion to approve and a second? And if we have that, then we can ask for amendments in the discussion.
Larry, I don't approve the agenda because I have a question too.
Okay, so we have a negative on, does everybody else disapprove anybody else approve the agenda?
I would approve the agenda with some amendments. So yes, I'll approve the agenda.
All right, and what is your, so I'll make a motion, we approve the agenda. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, is there a discussion? Ms. Greengold, you were gonna make.
Yes, sir. I would like to ask the commission if we could please move. I would like to move that we put 5B, which is the height limit discussion, on the agenda for next month. I think because of time limitation that we need to move something tonight, and I prefer that we move that one to January if we can. So I move that we please amend the agenda to say just that.
Is there any objection?
I think the January meeting is going to be pretty packed also, but I guess we can, if we have time for it, we can get to it in January.
This is Kathleen. I don't know if this would help, but my one of the comments I wanted to make about the agenda is item number 7, which is the adjournment at 9 o'clock. I totally understand that the meetings can be lengthy, and the last month's meeting did go to after 10, but I don't think we should arbitrarily just decide to close at 9 if we still have discussion. And I guess I'm bringing this up if
you don't mind, can we deal with one issue at a time? And
well,
that is,
I was saying that, Larry, in the fact that if we don't have the time limit to 9 o'clock, would we be able to discuss the height requirement tonight?
we will only have a time limit of 9 o'clock if the commission votes to adjourn at 9 o'clock. If the commission wants to continue, we can continue. We have an amendment by Ms. Greengold to delete the 5A, or 5B, I guess it is, the motion to for the height limit. There's no objection that I've heard, so we will make that amendment to the agenda. And now, Ms. Peralt, you suggested that we delete the motion at 9 o'clock. I'm going to make a motion at 9 o'clock. If everybody votes against it, that's fine with me. I just want to make it available because we can't continue these meetings to be indefinite. So any other discussion of the agenda?
Yes. For the motion in item C on the agenda, is that meant to reflect the motion that we discussed would be being brought up by me during this meeting? Because that's not my motion.
Okay. Yes, to answer your question, that was intended to address your motion. It's interesting because that's essentially, I sent the motion to Chris and asked him to tell me what it meant, and that's what he thinks it means. So the motion as written doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. So
Exactly. So I'd like to amend item C to reflect the motion that I made and make the
okay, well,
motion.
yes, that will be your motion. So yes, item C is your motion.
As written, and Fran has a copy of it over email.
We all have copies. You sent
It's
copies out.
plainly, okay, I don't understand why it was changed, but I'm glad it will be changed back to what I said.
Yeah, well, it will be your motion to make, so it's whatever you put forward. Is there any more discussion of the agenda? Okay, all in favor of the agenda as amended? Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
so I think that's everybody approved the amended agenda. 2 amendments, we delete B from old business, and C is Lori's motion as she states it at the time. Okay, now the meeting minutes, work session meeting minutes from December 2nd. Has anybody not read them? Hearing none, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the December 2nd work session. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. The minutes are approved for the December 2nd work session. Now we move on to the review of the revisions for the final site plan for Lot 1 and the residue tract Rod and Reel Incorporated Hotel and Resort Redevelopment Project. And I'll turn it over to Chris to manage that.
Okay, thank you. I'll just give a brief overview of my staff report. And then I've noticed that the applicants are here. Eric Blitz typically is the agent for the applicant in presenting, or at least initiating the presentations. So after a brief presentation, I'm certain that Mr. Chairman, you'll want to hear from Mr. Blitz and his team. On September 17th, 2017, the Planning Commission approved the final site plan for the Chesapeake Beach Resort and Spa project, the Rod and Reel project. it included a variety of elements, including restaurants and gaming facility and conference space and added hotel rooms to the complex and a number of site improvements as well. And the applicant has gone on to obtain all necessary federal permits like floodplain permits and state permits like fire marshal permits and MDE approvals, and the county building permits have all been secured. And the work has been moving forward towards completion. When it wasn't a few months ago, I was contacted and advised that the applicant would like to propose an amendment or revision to the approved final site plan. And as we talked about it, it occurred to me that the revision was such that I would consider it to be a major revision, certainly not minor. And minor revisions can be approved by the zoning administrator, myself. But a major revision requires that the planning commission review it just like it did the original plan. So that's why the applicant has come to you tonight to present the revision. And the revision relates, can be categorized as under two categories. The first is a reorientation of the building mass on what we call phase 2 of the project. And phase 2 is the rod and reel building and the associated conference facilities that exist there today. Phase 2 is the building, the floors that are added to that and the rearrangement of the building blocks, if you will, to build that complex. Phase 1 was the parking garage and a number of other site facilities and improvements to the property. In a nutshell, the first revision involves a set of architectural and building design changes. The revisions consist largely in lowering the proposed 5-story part of the building to 2 stories and repositioning that floor space atop the existing rod and reel restaurant, which would raise that part of the building to 4 stories. Essentially, it's a reconfiguration of the floor space and floor plan on the building. The taller element of the building will now be closer to the water and further from the central part of the property. So essentially, they're moving the mass of the building toward the water and building it on top of the existing restaurant, if you're familiar with the property. And that will be at 4 stories rather than 5 stories overall. There are a number of building elevations that the applicant provided us, and I included a couple of them in the staff report. One from the view of Fishing Creek, looking at the site, and then one from the parking lot, looking at the site. And you might have remembered that in my staff report, I mentioned that the main atrium, that large structure that is meant to resemble a historic train station, reminiscent of the town's history, that has been changed somewhat. And the essence the basic difference I see is that the hotel spaces would be extended along the rear of that atrium. And the atrium itself would become a smaller type of structure. But I'm certain that the architects that are gathered here tonight will provide a little more detail for the Planning Commission members. The other change is not as significant, but it involves a sign. It involves the 1936 bar and grill sign. And at the time of the staff report, the applicant didn't have the architectural renderings of that sign. And so in the absence of that sign, I said, if we don't get it in time, please come tonight to be prepared to discuss that and show us the rendering of the sign and the size and the various details. Effectively, the change in the signage for the 1936 bar and grill would be an amendment to the site plan and would allow the applicant to do something different with the signage than what was originally approved a number of years ago. The net effect of the change to the hotel project is that there will be 13 additional rooms. And that comes about largely through the resizing of the spaces and through adding additional building space. The impact of those additional rooms does not influence any of the other aspects of the site's approval or zoning standards. The parking totals are still met. All the other various issues that we typically deal with at site plan review are not really impacted. Stormwater management, for instance, critical area regulations. The issue here is entirely about building massing and essentially design and the movement of those various building elements within and near the building footprint of phase 2. Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. I would like to be able to chime in from time to time if the applicant's presentation raises any particular issues or concerns that I think should be brought to the attention of the commission.
Okay, so you won't be online the whole time, Chris?
No, I will be. I will certainly be here.
Oh, okay, okay. I wasn't sure what you meant. So the applicant is up next.
Chairman Brown, members of the commission, my name is Eric Blitz. I'm the attorney for the applicant, Rod and Reel Inc. I'll make a brief presentation summarizing the requested amendment to the final site plan that describes how the final buildings were redesigned and in the context of the existing site plan. And then you'll hear from the owner briefly, then Paul Woodburn, the civil engineer, and Jeremy Klein, the architect from WGM Architects. And then after we get to the, as Chris described, the building redesign element of the requested changes, I'll come back and discuss the amendments to the sign plan to amend the sign approval that was done as a part of the site plan. I'd like to refer the commission members to the narrative that I submitted to the application, so I won't restate in its entirety, as I think it covers the essence of our request. But the applicant is requesting the amendment to the currently approved site plan to facilitate the change to the design of the buildings and within the same building envelope. In the new building design, the mix of the internal uses of the building is in that same building envelope has changed, but the net intensity of the uses is substantially decreased, or at least not substantially increased. There are more hotel rooms and are more spread out gaming space. That is, the machines will be spread out more. There are no more greater machines, so the intensity of the gaming use doesn't change. It's just that they will be spread out in a broader open space. And there'll be slightly greater banquet space, but then
it's pretty damn boring.
with smaller restaurants and a smaller atrium. The architect will describe the details of the building redesign, but the essence of this application is that, as Chris mentioned, the 3rd through 5th floors of the currently approved 5-story building are moved approximately 115 feet east to be over top of the rod and reel. That has the consequence of lowering the overall height of the buildings, because the area where the 5-story building was to be becomes a 2-story building, and the rod and reel building becomes a 4-story building. And so
Wow, not a lot.
the currently approved building would be much higher than this design.
Oh.
There are minor adjustments to make in the making the building envelope smaller, and I'll let the architect and engineer go over the details of that. So the perimeter of the building envelope stays the same, and what was, in a sense, 3 buildings next to each other the existing bait and tackle, the 5-story building, the rod and reel, and the atrium becomes one integrated building design. Because the building envelope stays roughly the same, as you'll hear, the actual site plan changes are quite minor. As Chris mentioned, we broke this project up into 2 phases. The phase 1 work has been completed, which included the 1936 restaurant, the first half of the elevated walkway, the parking facility, and all of the site work up to about 10 feet of the building. We have active building permits for the phase 2 work, which would include the previously approved 5-story building and the atrium and the renovation of the rod and reel, as well as the completion of the elevated walkway. With your approval of these plans, to the approval of the amendment to the site plan, we'll be ready to proceed with an amendment to the existing building permit so that Calvert County can review the new building design. We anticipate that we can be ready to begin work on the demolition of the bait and tackle area and continue the foundations of the 2-story building in January. The southwest wall and the electric room of what will now be the 2-story building have already been built. So we need to continue with those foundations, but the rest of those foundations are kind of predicated upon getting this approval and then the building permit process. Therefore, at the end of tonight's hearing on this application, I request that the commission grant an amendment to the site plan so that Mr. Jakubiec can then amend the zoning permit, and we can then submit the revisions to the building permit documents to get Calvert County's building code review started. They can't start until that amendment occurs. The first thing they do is call Chris to say, is this consistent with the existing zoning permit? So that's why we're here tonight. It's a tight schedule, but we anticipate that we can accomplish it. Just so you know, the owners intend that the Rod and Reel restaurant portion in the will be operational while the 2-story part of the building is built. And then when that is complete, all the operations get moved over to the 2-story building, and we'll proceed with the rest of the building of the 4-story building in the atrium. So unless there's any questions of me at this point, I'll ask the owner's representative, Mr. Donovan, to make a brief statement. And then we'll hear from the civil engineer and then the architect. I think you'll find that the minor changes to the site plan continue to keep this site plan consistent with the Chesapeake Beach Comprehensive Plan and fully compliant with the town's zoning ordinance. So I'll pause briefly to find out whether there's any questions of me at this point, and then I would ask we bring in Gerald.
Do the other commissioners have any questions? Hearing none, if you want to go ahead with your next presentation.
Okay, so next we have Mr. Gerald Donovan, who's the owner of the Rod and Reel.
So can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Good. So back in on March 17th, when we got closed, what the hospitality industry across the country has gone through has been devastating to so many restaurants, hotels, etc. In our case, it gave us an opportunity to rethink what we were doing. And I had 2 problems over the years that the architect finally convinced me that what you're looking at tonight is such an improvement over the plan that we had approved. And I'm happy that we're not building that plan for 2 reasons. The first reason is I couldn't get it through my head to tear down the tackle shop, but it's a wood structure. It's not very old. We would have had to sprinkler it and put up a firewall, but the team convinced the rest of the owners to tear that down and make it the concrete and steel structure instead of 5 stories, 2 stories. The other big difference so it'll be a much safer building. So the other big difference is in the rod and reel itself. The rod and reel has a 1933 building that's a wood construction, and then it has what was built in the early 40s, and then it has the 1965 edition, which is on pilings and steel. In our approved plan, we leave the 1965 building, but that elevation is different than, say, today's tackle shop or today's existing hotel. So in reimagining this, and with the blessing of the architect and the engineer, we're going to tear everything down once we get stage 2 built, the game room and the CVQ, which then will all be at the same elevation. So the difference in terms of aesthetics, your hotel rooms, instead of looking at the creek, will be looking due east for the most part. Some will be looking to the north, and a few will be looking to the west. The ones looking to the east will be premium rooms, and I don't even know if you know this, but every time we rent a room for whatever amount of money, the town gets a 5% occupancy tax, which will be helpful because these rooms are going to generate more revenue because of that view. So at the end of the day, we looked at the different elevations and getting out of the flood zone. And with the new bulkhead already in, and the elevation being something that will be protected for a long, long time from water, I'm really happy that we're at this point. The thing I'm not happy about is how long it took my thick head to get us here, and it's on me. But at the end of the day, one of our core values is to constantly seek to improve. And from our perspective, that's what we've done here. We've presented a much better plan for the community, for the town, and for the prospects of it all working. And I want to thank everybody for their time and turn it over to which professional is next. Eric.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Gerald. So since we're focused on the site plan in this administrative procedure, I'd like to turn next to the civil engineer who's really responsible for the details of site plan, and that's Paul Woodburn.
Eric, appreciate everybody letting me be a part of this project, and I'm gonna do a quick presentation here. As Eric had said, and Gerald alluded to, and Chris mentioned, most of the site work was already developed and has been constructed under the current permits. And as you see in this rendering here, the parking lot would be the gray. To the left of that where it says phase 1, that's the garage. Mears Avenue would be to the lower left. That's where the arrows go in and out, and C Street. And then the light brown-ish color would be the new building in aggregate. And just below that, of course, is the existing hotel. And just to the left is the train station, museum, right? So currently, if you go out today, drive in, you'll see the parking lot in front of the garage, mostly constructed. The final topping of pavement hasn't been put on, but all the utilities have been installed up to the building: gas, electric, water, sewer, storm. The main drainage through Mears Avenue, which was part of the original design and construction of Mears, has been completed. So the primary focus from a site standpoint is really the last, I mean, Eric said 10 feet, but 10 to 20 feet around the building. And what probably the bigger change that you're going to see from a site perspective is the bait and tackle shop. As Gerald said, we worked quite a bit around the bait and tackle shop under the original design. And of course, the existing rod and reel. Can you show it with their little hand there, Jeremy, where the rod and reel restaurant is? Yeah, back there. So I'm sure you all know exactly where that is. So starting at the front left, where the bait and tackle shop would be, and then I'll work clockwise around. The rod and reel, or the bait and tackle shop, will come down. There's a walkway, a bridge walkway, if you hadn't seen it, that goes from the second level of the garage. That will now be extended directly into what would be the new bait and tackle, and the architect will give you some nice pictures of that. It's going to be beautiful, and bring in the railroad theme and motif a lot more than it was originally. And then as you progress left around the building, the existing pier and walkway, of course, will be new boards will be put down to take up the old boards and replace them just as phase one, all the way around to the back. And then the front walkway will be installed right in front of the building. Whereas if you go there now, there's a planter that'll sit right on top of the existing planter. Around to where the cafe, outdoor cafe is in front of the band shell area. So that lighter brown is new decking. It's where there's a little fish pond there now, et cetera, that area. That'll be new decking to maneuver people in and out of the outdoor space and into the atrium. And then the atrium will connect to the existing hotel. And Jeremy, the architect, will describe that a little bit here in a minute. And then as you progress back to the front, there's a porte cochere, which there was one on the original plan. This one's been modified slightly with a better fountain and pickup area and some seating areas off to the right, which brings you back to the parking lot right in front of the museum, which is the final piece that will restripe, overlay the paving to tie into the new building space. So as Chris alluded to, 90% of the site work is done. It's basically tying into the new building. And I should say over where Smoky Joe's where it was, if you guys can all remember that, gosh, it's so long ago, it seems now. That will be a nice entryway feature for the parking area. And that wall actually has been built, was built with phase one and the electric bunker. Jeremy, you could maybe show them where that is behind. Yeah. Now that electric bunker sits in front of what is the trash dumpsters, an enclosed trash pickup area. And then you're back to the bait and tackle shop. So that's a quick preview. And of course I can answer any questions on that, or even if it comes up after, I'll stay on.
I have one question. The I don't know, you call it seawall maybe, but how much elevation is the hotel going to be raised essentially? And just looking ahead at sea level rise and that sort of thing, what are your plans with respect to that?
All right, so the floodplain is at elevation 6, and the first floor of the building is going to be a minimum of 8.
So
right now, mean high tide, just to give you an idea, mean high tide, I know there's some crazy, tides, unusual tides and things, but mean high tide is elevation 0.42. Believe that. So that's your day-to-day average normal tide. So I don't know how much sea, Chris maybe could tell you. I know there's a 25 and a 50 year or something elevation rise that they're expecting. So if we're at elevation 8 and mean high tide is at 0.42, we're quite a bit above that. In the past 20 years, I've noticed quite a few tides and flood events in the parking lot, which is around elevation 2 to 3. So even in the worst of storms, we had a hurricane, oh gosh, don't date me, but 10 years ago, we actually went out and I marked a line in the pavement and shot the elevation, and it was elevation 2.8. So that gives you some idea. We're going to be about 5 feet above that.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions from commissioners?
Yes, I had one.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Okay, so how tall will the new, the 4-story hotel be in comparison to the existing hotel?
That's a Jeremy, you want to answer that one? The architect could probably, he's going to get into all
Yeah.
that if you want to just hold on, or you can tell him now.
Yeah, we can wait. That's fine.
Okay,
Yeah, he's going to do
that's something
elevations
we'll
with you.
address. Yep.
I have a question. What's the timeline for this project?
I can give you that answer. If you give us the permit, and I think Jeremy has more about the fire marshal, and the health department, we've worked very close with on the CBQ plans. We anticipate, going to dry piles or start the foundation if we get your blessings. Now, we already have a building permit, but it's changed because we're taking down the tackle shop, which we have a demolition permit for. But we will go from phase 2. Our employees will move into phase 2 from the rod and reel, and the rod and reel will immediately come down. And this will be from the architect will get into it, but this is actually going to work out to be one building that the fire marshal's going to very much, it's the best you can have concrete and steel for safety. Plus it'll be sprinkled. But our intent is phase 2 is about 11 months and the rod and reel is at the present time, according to our contractor, is about 16.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we can proceed to the architect.
Yes. When we first brought you plans, we had Little Architects out of Virginia. And since that time, the owners have shifted to WGM out of Annapolis, who are just fantastic architects and have really come up with some innovative solutions to the problems in a tight space in this. And I think when you see the renderings, the design is a much improved vision and more consistent with the site. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy Klein of WGM Architects to take you through the building uses and the redesign of the building.
Great. Thank you very much, Eric. Can you all hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. I think a place to start is this sort of axonometric that is going to show you a bird's eye overview of the currently approved plan and the amended plan that we're seeking approval of this evening. And I think both Chris and Eric described it very well in that it is essentially a shift of the hotel rooms, which were on the western part of the development, over to the eastern part of the development. As you look at this bird's eye view, and if I orient everybody again, you can see the existing hotel on the right-hand side of the image. You can see the parking lot. You can see in the current plan, the bait and tackle, which Gerald spoke about retaining, which under the amended plan will be incorporated more cohesively into the overall building development. But you can see that the footprints of the two plans are essentially identical. So it really is a shift of this portion of the building over to the east. Because of some of the work that has already occurred, and you heard reference to the construction of the foundation of this southeast wall, that's one of the driving factors behind the fact that the footprint stays identical. The other is the footprint of the existing rod and reel, which essentially gets removed and built over in the amended plan. You also heard reference that under the current plan, the hotel was a 5-story building, and this is again an appropriate exhibit to show you, we were able to reduce the overall height to 4 stories, bringing the overall height down by about 8 feet. Because as we move the hotel rooms to the east side of the site, we're able to spread them out over more area, which allows us to drop the height of the building. It also allows for a much more efficient layout of the rooms. You'll see that when we get into the plan, as this sort of odd shaped trapezoid was somewhat difficult in terms of not being able to do sort of a standard double loaded corridor or maximize views out to the bay, which obviously is a key component Gerald spoke about. So this is the rendering that was up on the screen as Eric and Gerald introduced the project. And a couple things I want to point out here. First of all, the aesthetic is very much in keeping with the currently approved plan. It draws on obviously some of the maritime hotel feel, some of the themes that Chesapeake Beach evokes, but it also tries to emphasize the history of the train and the importance of the train to Chesapeake Beach. Obviously, the Railroad Museum is right here. In the current and in this amended design, the atrium element stays very similar in terms of its appearance and its presentation. It's supposed to evoke that old classic train station feel. But we really thought there was an opportunity with this pedestrian bridge to emphasize this as sort of a railroad trestle, the connection over to the existing parking garage. And we really like the way that that sort of brackets the entire development. So you have the railroad trestle on the west side of the development, you have the atrium and the existing railroad museum on the east side of the development. So you kind of marry these themes of the train and then the Maritime Hotel, you know, evoking some of those Florida feels or some of the things you may be familiar with, but tying those two things together. Chesapeake Beach really is about, right, that history of a getaway place, a destination, a resort town, and we were getting there by train, and we really wanted to emphasize that with the development. The other things I want to point out in this particular rendering, we think by shifting the hotel rooms to the east, and you can see on this approach, they're very hidden from this approach. We think that it made the whole development have a much more pedestrian or human scale to it, a much more human feel, so that when you come into the site, you're not immediately overwhelmed by the greater bulk of the structure, but you're presented with a lower 2-story element, which allows the atrium to really emphasize itself in relation to the existing museum. And also point out here, again, with the demolition of the bait and tackle, that we're able to take this element, even though programmatically it's housing the same functions that the bait and tackle currently houses in terms of support for the charter fishing operation, they're now wrapped into the overall building and cohesive with the development. The materials on the building take their cues from the existing hotel. You have sort of the reddish shingles, the creamy colored stucco and siding, which all play off of and help that tie into the existing development. This is the view from Fishing Creek. I believe this was also in the staff report. But again, emphasizing the idea of that the trestle bridge connecting over to the existing garage, the lower building now, which programmatically houses the same functions that it did when it was a 5-story building, but it's just essentially the first 2 floors, in that it's the gaming floors and a CBQ restaurant, and then over the Rod and Reel restaurant to the east is where essentially 3 floors of hotel rooms get added. Here's a zoomed in axonometric of the amended plan that we're proposing today. This is a good shot to point out, Chris had brought this up in the staff report. again, part of the way we were able to keep this height down was by extending the hotel rooms over the east side of the atrium. We don't think that this had a negative impact on the aesthetic of the atrium as a train station type of element, because they sort of tuck behind that higher gable roof on the atrium. And we also don't think it's going to be an adverse effect on the interior environment. And Chris, this is a comment maybe more directed to you. The sort of programmatic space of the atrium is still a double height space all the way through, right? So you have 25 feet clear through that entire area. You have the same mezzanine, and we'll see that in the zoomed in plan. And you have the glass on the backside that then looks out to the bay for that event space. So we think that functionally, programmatically, and sort of the experience of that space are going to be very much what it was before, but it is going to allow that overall development to have a lower scale than would otherwise be possible. The other thing I want to point out in this zoomed in axonometric, you're going to see 2 rooftop terrace areas, one on the hotel and one on the 2-story building. The 2-story building is a pool for hotel guests. And the rooftop terrace is facing the bay to the east. These 2 plazas, and this is a difference from the current plan, these 2 plazas are sort of completely inward focused or hidden, nothing visible to the north, which was not necessarily the case with the previous, with the current plan. So you have this hotel, the pool, which opens to the south, and this plaza deck, which opens to the east, overlooking the band shell. You can also see here the pedestrian walkway, the trestle bridge coming in from the garage and connecting to the second level of this 2-story building. And here's just an overall plan view, looking at many of the same elements that we were looking at before, but orienting you again: existing hotel and train station to the south, the parking garage, which is currently built, this programmatic element, which is going to be the redone bait and tackle. This is basically the footprint of the existing rod and reel, which becomes the hotel and restaurant building. This is the 2-story gaming building with pool on top, and the atrium is essentially in the same place that it is in the currently approved plan. From a
Jeremy, if I
Yep.
can interrupt briefly, just to point out something that's important, I think, for the commission to understand.
Sure.
When you touched on the atrium being in the same place, it's not quite true, because the atrium under the existing plan was to take away the existing swimming pool and that crossover area, and came all the way flush up against the existing hotel.
That's
And
true.
that now under this plan, we'll keep those elements there. So the atrium actually got smaller on that southern side.
It did, and you can see a little bit of the sort of L here. So the presentation of the atrium aesthetically is still very similar as to the current plan, the view from the parking lot. But as Eric just pointed out, under the current plan, part of the existing hotel gets demolished and rebuilt into the atrium. Under this amended plan, the entry portion of the existing hotel stays status quo, and the atrium gets a little smaller to allow those elements to remain. The face of the eastern face of the atrium also moved a bit westward and is not pushed out quite so far towards the bay as it was in the current scheme. So I'll move through the floor plans here to familiarize you with what's happening on each of the levels, and sort of walk you through the construction phasing as well. So the initial, and Gerald touched on this, the initial phase of work would be to take down the existing bait and tackle shop, which sits currently right in this area, and then start construction of the two-story building. The existing rod and reel will remain in its current configuration during the construction of the two-story building. This is a huge improvement over the current plan, where there were a lot more operational gymnastics to try to keep the site up and running while this was happening. Gerald pointed out in the current plan keeps the 1965 portion of the rod and reel, essentially a rectangle right about here, but demolishes the northern portion of the building. And that was going to be in the initial phase of work. So you can see sort of jumping back and forth between these two halves of the site. Now, the first order of business is the construction of this two-story building. Everything that is active in the rod and reel moves over to the two-story building. When it's complete, the rod and reel gets demolished and you build the four-story building in the atrium. So it's a much cleaner split of construction sequencing and allows operations to proceed much smoother, also much safer from a life safety standpoint, in terms of being able to bring systems online, life safety and life protection systems. Programmatically, this two-story building, I pointed this out in the rendering, is essentially identical to the current plan in that it houses gaming and the small CBQ restaurant on the south side of the first floor. Difference being, in the current plan, there were also some administrative areas on the second floor, which have now been given over to gaming to allow the same number of machines to inhabit a larger space, more spread out space, which is obviously very germane in today's world. That's essentially the two-story building. The four-story building, again, has many of the same programmatic elements as currently exist in the rod and reel, in that the restaurant and the banquet spaces and the main kitchen are contained in that building. When you move up to the second floor of that building, you have support kitchen space, administrative space, and you start the hotel rooms on that level. The atrium, right, programmatically stays again the same as the current plan. We have a mezzanine on the second level that overlooks the lower level. You have that big glass wall looking out to the bay. And it's when we get to the third floor that the hotel rooms, the third floor is essentially just hotel program with hotel rooms, the majority of them facing east to the bay. And then you get the extension of a few of the rooms over the back half of the atrium. And that is the same on the fourth or upper level. Here's the open roof deck that's actually part of that level. It's not on top of the fourth level. It is part of the fourth level, the plaza deck. I believe you had in your package these signage exhibits that just show the building mounted signage and where they would be placed on the elevations. These are very similar, again, to what is currently approved under the currently approved plan, but you can see these elements that would identify different parts or programmatic elements of the complex. And then we included here, I don't believe you have this, but this was sent to the zoning administrator just recently. We redid the photometric calculation, which was part of the original site plan approval, just to show that there is essentially no difference from the photometric output from that in the original site plan. That makes sense because the footprint, again, is basically identical to what's in the currently approved plan. So the ground plane level lighting levels are going to be very similar to what you saw under the current plan. That brings me to the end of sort of the overview of the project, and we're very happy to take questions. I think I'm happy to answer any of them, but maybe we'll direct them to Eric and kind of let him distribute the questions from there, either to myself, Paul, or Gerald.
So with the chair's indulgence, I'd like to ask Jeremy a few questions just to elaborate on a few points.
Sure.
So let's start. If you could go back to the elevations at the end of your presentation.
The signage.
Yeah, but it also includes the elevations.
Yep.
Councilman or Commissioner Evans asked about the heights, and I'd like you to cover that.
Sure.
So, and it was also brought up, I believe incorrectly by Paul, that we were at elevation 8, and I believe it's 9 to be consistent with the hotel. The existing hotel, as I understand it, is at elevation 9, and this project would bring all of the buildings to the exact same elevation.
Yeah, I think that's right, Eric. I think Paul said that everything would be above elevation 8, and what I think he's alluding to there, you heard this earlier in the presentation, the electric bunker has already been constructed.
Right.
And this is to bring the main electric power for the new development. So the electric bunker was constructed at the elevation of the currently approved plan, which is just above 8 at 8.2. So that bunker is at 8.2, and that's where it is. The rest of this development now, Gerald talked about this in his intro. We're raising it a slight bit further up to 9. Just looking ahead, nobody knows what the sea rise is going to be. I think the chair spoke to that. But as long as we're doing this thing, let's try to do it the right way. So that's the elevation 9 that you're going to see all these buildings at. In terms of the height, I know this is very small on the screen, but the height is defined by the zoning ordinance is the midpoint of these sloping roofs. So under this scheme, that height is 62.5 feet. For the 4-story building, which is very similar to the existing hotel. You can see it in the section over here. The old scheme, the 5-story building, was just north of 70. So the overall height of the complex comes down about 8 feet.
Okay. And so then I would ask whether the commissioners or the chair have any questions of the architect.
Sure.
Do the commissioners have any other questions you would like to raise at this time?
Yes. None of the parking spaces will be lost not in the garage, but actually on the, next to the hotel itself.
Correct.
That's correct. Because of, again, the footprint remaining essentially identical, and the fact that this foundation wall is already constructed, I think this is the best slide to show it. The parking lot is really not impacted. There's a slight, I mentioned a slight move westward of the atrium, which is getting it a little more off the bay and allowing this existing piece of the hotel to remain. But we did not lose any parking spots. You can see that was essentially the skinny point at the end of the porte cochere. And this actually was when we met with North Beach Volunteer Fire Department, we gave them a little less aggressive of a turning angle at this end of the site.
I see. Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question that's similar to her question. Speaking about the parking lot and the footprint being relatively the same, I'm guessing the impermeable surfaces will be similar to the old plan also.
Yeah, they didn't change at all.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead with your question.
Okay, so is this the complete packet? It doesn't include any lighting information or any lighting studies, any shadow studies, any additional information? This is it?
So the photometric was that the architect referenced at the end is the updated version of showing the light levels of this development. It is compared to the photometric that was approved, that was part of the approval for the original. And the reason to do that is to demonstrate that the lighting hasn't changed materially. The lighting levels continue to be as currently approved. And so that combined with the original photometric study is your baseline for your lighting. The actual lighting fixtures are they going to be identical to the ones already approved. So they match the town light poles, the black, they kind of look old, historic, fit with the town in the parking lot. And those will be put in pretty much last after all the construction because you're going to be moving trucks in there. But yeah, those will be the same as currently approved. No additional lighting required along the water. There will be the lights that would have already been there for the ramp walkway along the water. The elevated walkway retains the same lights. The one thing that is not exactly related to lighting, so maybe I shouldn't mention it, but the original plan of the elevated walkway was to jog around the bait and tackle. So as it came across from the garage to the the 5-story building, it entered on the second floor. It had to go around the bait and tackle, so it moved southward. Under this plan, it's much more direct. It goes directly into the building, and so there may have been 1 or 2 lights that are removed from that process because there was going to be lights along that elevated walkway. So that's really the only change to lighting.
That, and then it's moving closer to Fishing Creek, is that correct? The whole building is moving closer to Fishing Creek and many of the lights?
No, it's not
no.
moving closer to Fishing Creek. It's keeping the same exact footprint relative to Fishing Creek, although there's a very small portion of the 2-story building that will actually be a little bit further away, not much, a couple 8 inches or something away from Fishing Creek. The rod and reel stays in the same position. The focus of this is really moving the 3 levels of hotel rooms under the currently approved plan that you can see there, and just moving them 115 feet to the east to be over top of the rod and reel. So it doesn't get closer to the Fishing Creek at all.
So the move is towards the bay to the east, not towards the creek to the north. Yep.
There's nothing moving towards the townhouse complex across from Fishing Creek. Am I correct in that?
Correct. I mean, the footprint is essentially at the footprint right now of the rod and reel is at the boardwalk, and nothing is extending past where that current face of the rod and reel is. That's correct.
Okay, and is the lights on the parking garage in phase 1 compliant with the lighting study? Because the light is escaping in a very bright fashion, and we've gotten some complaints.
Jeremy, I don't know whether the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing company, Henry Adams, just took the data from the garage lighting, but it's part of the photometric plan. So the photometric plan that has been submitted and was submitted back when the original plan was approved, both show the lightings that come from the garage. I don't know, Jeremy, whether they did any form of update to that.
Right, well, there was a revision that could have affected it. Right?
Yeah, when they did this update of the photometric, I believe, you know, they were really focusing on the eastern side of the site and what we're asking for in the amendment. I believe that they used the same calculations on the western side of the site for the garage without update.
So the garage was built as permitted in the exact lighting plan that was called for. I think the lighting that we've heard about as complaints has been from the interior lighting of people being able to see into the garage. And you're not really going to escape that with a lot of effort. Mr. Woodburn is looking into ways that we can mitigate the lights shining to the north towards the creek from the interior, but there has to be a minimum amount of light in the garage for safety and security purposes, for and safety basically so that people can see, but also for security lighting, the cameras being able to pick up, because the whole garage is under camera.
Right, right. I have lighting effect problems. I'm wondering if the original lighting study is appropriate for another building.
I don't know how to answer that other than when you get into the details of the photometric study, it shows that the amount of light as they measure it going out to the north, impacting as the way they measure it in certain distances from the perimeter of the property line, is no different than the original photometric study. And that's the key element with respect to the impact on Fishing Creek, because you have to limit light load over top of the property line, including the water for critical area purposes, which we do. You're always going to see from a distance lights, internal lights in buildings. That the photometric isn't designed to describe that.
I think it's
Well,
a
Is this open to the public for comment or questions?
Can we wait until all the commissioners have finished their questions and then we will open it to the public?
Okay, thank you.
I think sometimes there's a misconception or a misunderstanding about what lighting studies show, and sometimes what the regulatory requirements of lighting are that Eric was talking to. So photometrics, when you do a photometric calculation like this, which is, and this is a discussion that we often hear. When you do a calculation like this is showing light levels or foot candles that are on the ground, right? And that's really what you can measure in terms of amount of illuminance. So a lot of times you will have specific stipulations about the level of light that can hit a property line, or the level of light that can be X distance from a property line, or from a design standpoint, the level of light that we need to achieve at a surface to do certain tasks, whether it's reading or walking or being safe or exercising or whatever it might be. That's how you measure light, illuminance at a surface. So that's what this type of plan is showing. Some of the complaints about light sometimes are, I can see that light from far away, right? And I think the easiest way to kind of describe that or think about it is, right, you can see a light in the distance. You can see a light across the water. You can see the stars. That doesn't mean the stars are putting any light on this surface, but you can still see those. So it's sometimes the conversation is about two different things, whereas the regulatory level is talking about the amount of illuminance at a surface. People react to that and say, well, but I can see that light, but that's not what the photometric study is really doing. There's no real way to stop the ability to see a light other than cut it off, put something between you and the light, or turn the light off. So to the extent that fixtures, you hear about full cutoff fixtures, which try to make sure, those are doing two things. Number one is trying to direct the illuminance down to keep light pollution. But number two, it's trying to keep those peripheral views of being able to actually see the light source to a minimum. And those are the requirements for many of the fixtures now, and the type of fixtures that are included in this project will be those type of full cutoff fixtures. Again, but depending on what your angle or where you are, if you have direct line of sight, you're going to see that light source.
So the photometric study is based on the original plan or on the revised plan?
This photometric study that we submitted is based on the amended plan that we're presenting today. Yes.
Using the original photometric study?
No.
Based on the original? This
No,
is
it's
based on the,
this is calculated on the lights that are included with this amended plan. And I can say that confidently about the east side of the site, because I know that this part of the site was specifically recalculated based on the new building and everything. We wanted to make sure that there was not a significant departure from what was previously approved to what we're showing now. I can't say whether the calculation was redone for the parking garage, because that we didn't ask them to focus on that. We were talking about the portion of the project that's yet to come. I believe that when they run a model like this, they take all the light sources that they put in their model and they run the model. So this photometric for the garage on this half of the site should look similar or identical to the previously approved plan, because it's going to be based on the light sources that were included with that plan. I'm not sure if I'm answering what you're asking.
oh, yeah, you are. So basically what I'm hearing, there is no intent at all to release that problem.
This amended plan is not bringing forward any changes to the garage. No.
Okay. I have actually quite a few questions. Do we want to go to somebody else, or should I finish some of my questions?
Or why don't you finish your questions, please?
Okay, I have some questions, and then I have kind of some general comments. Which town stakeholders have been notified of this revision, and when were they notified? And by stakeholders, I mean residents, nearby properties, etc. Chris, anybody?
I think you're on mute, Chris.
I'm sorry, I'm back. So we sent notice out per the zoning ordinance to all adjoining property owners, and actually to the homeowners association or the property owners association, I believe on the north side. But as usual, it went out broadly to all adjoining property owners and anybody across a public street from the site.
On what date?
About 12 days before this meeting, 2 weeks ago. Fran will have to be more specific, Lori, if you really need a date.
Well, I'm just
Fran,
wondering, I think the ordinance does say 30 days. Is that correct?
No, it says 10 days.
It says 10 days? Okay. This question has been answered. This site plan includes increase in square footage that will be used for gaming looked like it was about double to me. Is that correct?
I don't have the exact, I don't know off my head the exact area of the gaming under the currently approved plan, but definitely more area has been allocated in this plan to gaming, and that was by moving some of the program out, essentially, basically on the second floor of this building under the currently approved plan, and moving that over into the hotel building to open up more room for gaming. Again, the number of machines is the same, but the intent is to provide more space to be able to spread those machines out.
During the,
Is there anything preventing acquisition of additional? This question is for Mr. Donovan. Is there any intent to acquisition more gaming machines?
Are you asking me, is there a bill before the Maryland legislature? The answer is no.
Okay, but it does increase your ability to do that.
Increases my, to do what?
It increases your space to expand gambling. This plan does.
We have no intention of asking the legislature for more machines.
the amount of machines is limited by state law. So it can only be changed through an act of the legislature. And the way more space was assigned to the gaming is that the experience of the pandemic, where we had to space customers out between greater distances, 6 feet between each machine, demonstrated also at the same time that customers appreciated more space between machines. So the goal was, you're going to keep the same intensity of use, which is 278 machines. You're going to keep that, but you're just going to spread people out more to make them feel more comfortable. The cost of that was smaller restaurants, CBQ restaurant seats fewer people, slightly smaller kitchen. So that became smaller. That was one of the consequences. And then the other consequence is the Rod and Reel restaurant itself becomes substantially smaller. The banquet space got a slight increase, but that's also at the expense of the Rod and Reel restaurant portion. So those are just reallocations of uses within the building structure, not really a greater intensity of use. In fact, the parking count is actually slightly lower than the original plan that's been approved. That is, when I say the parking count, the required off-street parking.
Right. I guess my concern is that there's been a concern over the pervasive increase in gambling in our town, and expanding that gaming area and taking away other uses within the building wasn't really what was originally proposed.
I have no idea what you're talking about. What are you talking about in town? A pervasive increase in gambling? What are you talking about?
I'm talking about there's a lot of gambling going on in town, and the town council and the mayor have stated that they would like to limit the expansion of gambling. That was part of their platform.
Ma'am, I don't know anybody trying to expand gaming. I don't think Bobby Abner and I are very good friends. I know he isn't. I know Mr. Luckett didn't. And there are no more licenses in Calvert or Anne Arundel County by state law. And, you know, it's like when people talk about, oh, it's going to be casino gambling. Casino gambling would take a statewide referendum, and the legislature would also have to approve it. And it would, nobody has the ability to do that. The 6 casinos that are in Maryland are it. That's not going to change. And as far as I know, there is no increase in gaming. But I appreciate your opinion, and I definitely respect what you're saying. But for the record, we have what we have, and that's it.
Okay, that's heartening. I wasn't provided with any of the previous revisions, so I have nothing to compare this plan to, whether it's better, worse, whatever. I do know that some pathways were adjusted in previous plans, some outdoor dining was adjusted in previous plans. It seems like every time we get a revision on this project, the gaming gets bigger and things like dining, walkways, things like that decrease. That's just a comment. I have another question. This plan includes an increase in hotel rooms.
13 rooms.
Are you using any particular calculation to calculate your necessary workforce that would be related to these hotel rooms?
Well, we're in the dead of winter. Right now, we have over 200 employees. And when the banquet space comes back and the Rod and Reel restaurant, which when you're looking at this plan right here, it shows you the Rod and Reel is going to have water views on all 3 sides. In other words, you'll either be looking out at the marina, the bay, or the activity in the creek, or a beautiful view over top the charter boats back to what 1936 looks like. And hopefully there'll be people out on the deck and whatnot for 36. But the 13 rooms, the demand for the hotel rooms is why we're building the hotel rooms, and to get to a level where we can handle groups during the week that the Sunday through Thursday business will pick up, so that we have the space in the banquet space and the meeting space on the 4th floor to handle those additional rooms. When you add up the rooms, we actually lose a room in the existing hotel because the bridal suite will have a walkway over to the mezzanine. And when you look at the mezzanine right there, there's Romeo and Juliet at the end right there on the balcony, so that in the winter, fall and winter, the shoulder season for weddings, you'll be getting married on a glass wall, and we'll set that up as though you're in a church, and you'll be able to walk right next door through the doorway into our banquet space. So we feel we'll be doing somewhere in the vicinity of 150 weddings per year. Our best year at the present time was a little over 70. So we need with the weekend demand we have on the hotel rooms, we feel very confident we'll, have the occupancy. Thank you.
Okay, so you have no worry about any potential B&Bs or other hotel facilities that might evolve in our area?
I hope there's as many people come as possible. Business begets business. The more people, whether it's over in North Beach or whether it's in Harrington Harbor or wherever, we work with all of the people in our industry, the hospitality industry. You have to think regionally, and competition is good for all business.
Okay, and so I guess my question relating to the 13 hotel rooms really relates to housing. And so, Chris, this is also for you. Is there some kind of calculation associated with those 13 hotel rooms that is going to appear in somebody's, I guess, case for adding workforce, affordable, or government-assisted housing in our area?
I don't think I understand the question.
That's a really good question.
So there's no planned net increase of employees to handle this small amount of extra rooms. The current employees will handle the same number of rooms. You're talking about cleaning 14 extra rooms. It's just not going to have an impact.
Right. I mean, if you, there's different calculations. I'm wondering which one both Mr. Donovan and Chris are going to be using. Chris, in your housing report, and Mr. Donovan in any petitions to the town to add more housing.
You referring to low-income housing?
Any housing, including a low-income and affordable housing mostly, yeah.
I don't know anything about any housing connected to our hotel at all.
So you have no concerns about keeping the levels of housing in Chesapeake Beach where they're at?
What's that got to do with this plan?
Well, you're adding hotel rooms, which will require employees. I'm just wondering if in the future, you're then going to say, I have this hotel, I need all these employees, and now I need more housing in Chesapeake Beach. It's a discussion that the Planning and Zoning Committee has been having recently, and so I'm just curious.
I would like to really address that.
Okay.
The developments that are ongoing right now, that are actually working in Richfield Station and the Heritage one, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
There is no other land other than a minor amount of infill. When you go west out Beach School from on Bayside Road, there's a nice farm there. Lovely people, they're tree farmers, and that property is in the ag program.
Just put them on top of the.
It will never be developed. It will never be developed. So when you go to the north, there's some open acreage left around the wastewater treatment plant, and the owner of that is the town, and I don't foresee that ever being developed. So the only development you really have left is in the center of town, in the town center, and also the lots we have up at Senate Place. But other than, and they're all relatively minor in terms of the number. So we have people that live all over Calvert County. We have people that live in Prince George's County. We have people that live in Charles County, come to work here every day. I mean,
okay, so you're saying that of your business will require no housing to be added to Chesapeake Beach.
my business has, I'm running a hospitality business here. I'm not running a housing development.
Okay, let's move on to give someone else a chance. I'd like to open it up to the public. Is there anyone?
I haven't asked any questions. Mr. Brown, I have not asked any questions yet.
Yes, well, go ahead, please.
Okay. I guess, okay, since I was here in 2017, it's a little confusing to see the plans from 2017 and then this one, because I didn't get the elevation. I would have liked to have seen an elevation off of 261, actually, off of the bridge, to see what the perspective would have been off of 261. So I don't think you have that elevation available, because I wanted to see, how it looks from actually the people who live here. They usually have to go on that bridge when they commute into 260.
Is this the one you're talking about, Cindy?
No, I'm talking actually about if you're driving over the bridge, over Fishing Creek.
Yeah.
You're kind of looking head on to this abutment out onto the bay of that extra, those extra rooms. So I
thought
just
you
wanted
had
to see.
one drawing that showed the parking lot and the new phase 2.
I'm just trying to understand the perspective we're asking for. So
So off of if you're driving on the main road there, right in
Right.
front of 1936, and you're
Right.
crossing over Fishing Creek, and
Right.
you're looking to the right, which is what everybody's view is when you're in the community. You know, we're looking over, we want to look at the bay, we want to see the bay. We don't want to really see structure, but I wanted to see how it looked from that perspective. I don't think you have that elevation, do you? You don't have the head on from that bridge, that elevation.
Yeah, I asked for that too, because it seems like you might see the pool from that elevation.
No, you won't. I really don't think you will see the pool. So I am trying to understand, but you're talking about driving essentially the other direction coming
No,
from.
I'm trying, no, if you're, well, I don't care if so north or south. I just wanted to know, what will the people in our community, well, I live right up the street from the Rod and Reel, so I guess my community, but you know, even people all from the Willows or anybody south who are
Sure.
driving north on 261, let's
Yeah.
just say north, or going south, either way. But
Yeah.
I just want to know what everybody is going to see when they're looking out at the Fishing Creek towards the bay, what it is they're going to see.
Yeah. So this perspective is essentially if you're basically in the creek, right? If you're in the
Yeah.
Right,
creek.
if I'm in a boat, right, but I'm just saying if you're in a
Or-
car.
Understood. So the bridge here would be just to the right of this image. So if you were on the bridge, you would be to the right of this image.
Right, correct.
So you'd essentially, this is what you would be looking at. This is the elevation that you would see from anywhere on the bridge. This is the tableau that you would see
Right, I'm trying
in
to see
front of you.
yeah, I understand I know, I can see the building. I'm just trying to see what everybody's gonna be looking at. Let's go back to because you obviously don't have that elevation. How many square feet, what is the difference in square footage between the 2017 plan and this plan? What is the difference in square footage?
So it is total numbers. It's about 20,000 square feet total.
So it's 20,000 square feet more for the new proposal.
Correct.
So even though you are maybe coming down maybe 8 feet in height, you're spreading it out over a larger distance, and hence you've got a much broader look at a building that wasn't there before. It was more compact and maybe a few feet higher, but what you've done now is added 20,000 square feet more of everything from hotel rooms to gaming area to, and the gaming area can be anything from arcade to a lot of things that, that we're not even talking about right now. And yes, it's spread out now for COVID, but I can assure you in 6 or 7 months, it won't be spread out for COVID. But the point I'm trying to make here is that when I go over the screenshot that's Chris sent, actually it was the exact same numbers that I got on the 2017 plans, and the numbers meaning how many parking spaces we have for the capacity of persons that you're using in this facility. What concerns me is that what you call the Crab House in 2017, which is now the 1936, you I think are not giving the correct numbers here as I'm looking, because I went down there today and checked on the total capacity, and it looks as though you're up to for the indoor and outdoor of that 1936, you're looking at over 400 patrons just for that facility. And with 400 patrons for that facility, you have listed really here 120 per, when it comes down to figuring out the parking allotment. So the reason why I'm bringing up that particular facility is because it's showing me a huge discrepancy between what we've allotted for parking and what it turned out to be. And that confuses me as to that hasn't been actually accurate. And also the signage has me concerned. The fact that you've put up a sign and we're now seeing that there's a modification that wasn't approved beforehand, and now it's been put up, and now we're trying to see a modification, an amendment to that. And I'm kind of concerned about that. So when I go back to these, let's just go back to these numbers again. The numbers that I am seeing as far as what you consider are a daily capacity, well, let's just say a total capacity in how many persons can be in your facility, I am coming up to a lot more numbers than what you're coming out to in your plan here. And it doesn't match up with the amount of parking spaces that we have. And I'm already concerned because the complaints I'm getting are from the Rollins people and from my own neighbors who can't get and turned out. And this is during COVID when you're not even open, and we're having problems accessing Stinnett Road and getting out to the light already. So my point is, if you're adding 20,000 square feet to this new plan, we could be adding a lot more numbers of persons that are using the facility and hence needing to have parking. So we haven't really accommodated for that. I know that Chris says, oh yes, there's no changes, but I don't think Chris has the right numbers. I don't think you're giving us the correct numbers, because I'm going down there and totaling them up myself by looking on the signs you have in the windows. So I'm very confused and concerned that we're being led astray in some of the information that we're getting on these plans, and then we're not getting accurate information. When we looked at the 2017 plans and that lighting in that parking lot, we should not be looking at bare bulbs when we're looking into that parking lot. There should be covers on those to direct the light down, and not so that as we're driving up, we're looking right into the light. We shouldn't be doing that if it was done correctly. So I'm concerned that there is a lot of corners being cut here. There's a desire to put in more intensity into this area. And you tell me, oh, Mr. Blitz says it's in compliance with the comprehensive plan. No, it's not, because we want a small town feel, and I don't sense that 20,000 square feet is a small town feel. And so this totally confuses me, and I do not understand how we are not getting accurate numbers here. And I'd like somebody to explain to me why I'm seeing the numbers different than what they are down at the windows at the facility down there. Who would like to explain that to me?
Okay.
Can I take a stab, Eric, real quick, just a
Please,
follow-up
somebody.
question? I'd like to ask, when you're saying the numbers in the window, are you talking about the posted capacity from a fire marshal standpoint?
I'm talking about the numbers that they have posted for COVID, which is half of what the posted numbers are 200 for the 1936. I'm assuming that means you've got a total of 400 that you can have in that one place. And that doesn't match up with, I'm telling you right now, we do not have enough parking there when you are fully in business. There is no way. And then if you're going to have all these weddings and banquets and they're all coming out onto Stinnett Road at one time, Rollins are very angry. They are extremely angry that they're not being asked any questions about this, that all of a sudden we've got all these people merging out to their street. People can't come out of their driveways, and they come back and complain to them about it. And I want to know what the rod and reel is going to do in order to protect the other businesses in this community, as well as the people in the townhomes right up the street. They're going to have a problem when you've got all these weddings. You're going to have 150 weddings. Well, you have a banquet hall that holds 850 people. If you've got a banquet hall that holds 850 people and they all show up to this wedding, this is going to be quite a nightmare for the community in that townhome community.
Where's that banquet hall? Eight, I didn't know.
I have it sitting right here. It says banquet hall, meeting rooms. That hall is 850 people. It says right here, banquet meeting rooms, 850 people. I haven't been into a wedding there, so I don't know, but it says 850 people. That's just for one area. Then when you add up all the bingo, dining, outdoor patrons, you've got the staff, how many rooms total are you expecting? I have down here 132 keys. How many rooms do you expect in the total? How many rooms?
132 is the number of
32.
rooms.
And is that with the added 13 or 14 rooms?
Yes, it also includes the removal of the 2 rooms in the existing hotel.
Okay, so we have 132 and there's only 10 staff listed here. Now I hear there's 200 staff. I mean, maybe the 200 aren't working all the time, but I have down here 10 staff.
Well, that's 10 staff attributed to hotel. That is, hotels don't.
Well, then that
have a
means
lot
that
of
we're
staff,
missing all the restaurant people, we're missing all the casino people.
which
So
have
there's a lot of
different
staff.
calculations for parking. You're jumping around to so many questions that we can't even address any of them.
Well,
Right,
it's
I
all
think-
one big question, and that is, do we
Okay,
have the
but do you want
parking
to
for
hear
these
the
extra
answers or do you want to just keep
20,000
that?
people?
Okay, but
Well,
with all due respect,
may I?
you got to let
Sir,
me
I think-
answer some of these questions.
Okay, I think the problem is that we received these plans 9 days, or actually 6 days ago. And we received no information on previous revisions. I've never seen the original site plans. And so the planning leading up to this meeting right here hasn't provided us with enough information to even make a good decision. All these questions can't be answered in one night. And this is a key property in the town. It's the key property in the town. It's also the property that's developed to the highest capacity in the town. And I don't know if the previous revisions were conducted like this, but this is no way to revise a major site plan for the key property developed at the highest capacity in the town. And we don't have the information that we can look and think about to approve it. Now, we'll listen to the answers, as many answers as we can tonight, but in general, this is no way to approve a major site plan revision. We haven't had enough time to take in.
We've heard from Commissioner Greengold and Commissioner Blackwelder. Commissioner Larson or Evans, do you have anything you'd like to ask?
I don't see Jeff on the camera, but I believe they've answered the questions that I had.
Okay, Mr. Larson?
I don't think he's on tonight.
Oh,
Larry.
he was.
Oh, okay.
I had to go to the facility and I just returned. I don't have any questions.
All right, so let's see. Does anybody want to, Commissioner Greengold or Blackwelder, you have a motion you want to make, or what do you want to do? What do you propose?
Oh, I thought they were going to answer the questions and then you're going to go to the community, right? And have them ask questions. They were going to answer my questions. I think I don't know if Mr. Blitz was going to answer the questions I had about the numbers.
I certainly can. I'm just waiting on the chairman to direct me to whether it's my turn.
Yeah, Mr. Blitz, go ahead.
Okay, so let's start with the intensity of the use. The design of the building internally has changed. So while you add 20,000 square feet, it's done within the same exact perimeter of the existing plan. How did that be accomplished? In the original plan, you had a series of buildings that were next to each other. So those had to have spaces. There was a promenade that existed between the rod and reel and the 5-story building that was an average of 10 feet wide. I would say slightly wider in most of it. And then there was the space between the bait and tackle and the 5-story building. That is the space that makes up the additions, because you really are keeping the exact same building envelope. In fact, it's actually on the 5-story building that becomes the 2-story building, you're actually pulling it in very slightly to the south on that north wall along Fishing Creek. So you're filling in the space between buildings, but keeping the same building envelope. You're also, remember, taking down the bait and tackle, which was in the existing plan to stay at the same space, and now building a building in replace of that. It's the same 2-story building, it's just integrated into the building, so that you don't have those absence of spaces or the spaces between buildings. The reason you had to have spaces between the buildings at a certain dimension were for life safety and the fire, because they have 2 different building types, and that requires a certain lot line delineation where you keep spaces. And even though you still had to sprinkler them, they could be a certain distance from each other. So you avoid those problems. So you're really not increasing the intensity of the use. What you're doing is making a more efficient use of the existing building envelope. The occupancies that you're citing for the 1936 are wildly in excess of the certificates of occupancy for the thing. So I'm not sure what you're referring to, but it's built upon the number of seats that we used in the original plan and was approved both by this Planning and Zoning Commission, the building permit, and the health department. So it's the same number of seats. In a bar area, yes, you could probably have more people, and there is a distinction between the number of people in a fire setting. That's what Mr. Klein was getting to, than the off-street parking calculations. The off-street parking calculations, though, for a restaurant are based upon the number of seats. So you don't, the parking itself is no different than what was already approved. With respect to I'm trying to think of the other issues. Let me go back to my notes.
While you're looking, Eric, I just want to jump in graphically here, Cindy, if I can, because this might help. And I understand, Laura, you had said, you know, you weren't on the commission for the previous amendment in 2017, so you're not having that plan. But I'm going to try to crudely draw on this drawing. What Eric is saying, right? This perimeter, and this is where I talk about the footprint, right? That's
the building envelope.
Yeah, that's the building envelope. So that is essentially identical to what is existing. What Eric pointed out, and this is what I think is the biggest improvement over the plan, and it was a hard sell for Gerald. It was a hard sell. This was like me talking to him for close to 2 years to try to get him to agree to this. He wanted to keep this bait and tackle right here that sits right here. And to do that, this is when Eric was talking about separate buildings. This, right, is the existing rod and reel on the site. This right here. So when the development was happening and you were trying to keep both of these buildings, let's try to pick another color, right? And you're trying to keep both of these buildings. You can't just incorporate these buildings of a different construction type. You heard about the wood construction. You can't just incorporate those into a new steel and concrete building and say that they both have the same protections from a life safety standpoint, that they're both as safe types of buildings, because they're not, right? Obviously, a wood building can burn much easier than a steel and concrete. So there are different rules about what you can and cannot do. So when we, in the currently approved plan, the new buildings are this kind of weird shape, and this is where this came from, to fit kind of in between these existing buildings. And what you end up with is you end up with this space in between. Because they're separate buildings, they have to be a certain distance off of each other. So you end up with this space in between which is not, it's just not nice space at all, right? It's kind of like alleyways in between the buildings. And in the current plan, we did everything we can to make this space as pleasant as possible. But at the end of the day, it's a space between two buildings that is, in that plan, it was 12 feet wide with building walls going up on either side of you. It's just not a great place to be. The current plan, once Gerald agreed to say, okay, we can take this building down, now all of a sudden, all of those machinations about building a firewall here, 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 those can all go away because now you can build a new building that is concrete and steel that doesn't have those spaces in between. So a lot of the space, Cindy, to your point, a lot of the space that was picked up in between is from those interstitial spaces. It's from the outdoor pathways that existed because of code requirements, because we had separate buildings between new and existing. Right? So all of this area here, all of this area here, on multiple levels, then when you take this area and put it up multiple levels, you start to get to that 20,000 square feet add. From a bulk standpoint, this is where I really think that this plan is vastly superior to the currently approved plan, because I would argue, even though there's more square footage, the bulk impact, this is when I talked about pedestrian and human scale, is much, much less. For the vast majority of people, whether you're looking at this view, whether you're coming over the bridge or whether you're actually coming into the complex, you've put the smaller mass of the building closer to where people are viewing it from. So before, where you were met with this 5-story structure immediately when you come into the complex, or if you're looking right from the bridge, you were talking about your approach drive, that 5-story structure is much closer to you than now this 4-story structure is. The only people that this 4-story structure got closer to are the people who are sitting out here in the bay looking at it. They had the smaller structure, which was, and now everybody else gets the smaller structure closer to the town and the views. So yes, there is more square footage, absolutely. But from a bulk and massing standpoint, we think this is a huge improvement in terms of the presentation to all the residents of Chesapeake Beach. Eric, did that give you time to pick up your other questions?
So the use and occupancy in 1936 is currently set at 140. Now that's different than the parking counts. I think what I want to turn to next to answer Ms. Greengold's questions is, Paul, can you walk us through the parking calculations? Because we provide with the plans the parking calculations. Those are each dependent upon the type of use and a calculation based upon the standard that's in your zoning ordinance. That's the required off-street parking. Paul, do you want to take the lead on that, or do you want me to read through it?
I mean, I'd be happy to read through it. I think that the overriding, I guess, thought here is that Cindy, is the capacity is different than the actual seating, and the seating capacity is what sets the parking in the sense of 1936. And we did increase that. I think Eric said that it was the same, but we did increase that on the proposed, knowing that there wasn't going to be more seats in there. I don't know what's in there today. I haven't been in there today, but 120 is what it's been set at.
It's 202 actually, and it's a
Well,
total.
well, wait a minute. The seating is different than capacity, right? So the seating
capacity, and this is when I jumped in and asked just the sign that you were looking at, Cindy, and you were saying the COVID sign, but from a building code standpoint, right? So when we calculate Again, this is from a life safety standpoint. When we calculate the occupancies of each of these spaces, we have to go per the building code, what the building code says. And the building code has tables that list for a different type of space, you have to calculate X amount of square feet per person for that type of space. So it's different for an exercise space, a classroom space, an office space, an assembly space, a gaming space, whatever it might be, right? Those code mandated occupancies, maximum occupancies, are almost without exception significantly more what's the right way to put it? Significantly more generous than the amount of people you can actually fit in a space. And that's by design, because code wants you to design the building such that it is safe for its intended use for the amount of people that you can fit in. So when you see a posted sign, anytime you go into an assembly space, you'll see a posted sign by the door that says, this space has a maximum occupancy of X amount of people, right? It might say 375 people. And it's a good exercise to do. You look around a space like that and you're like, there's no way I could physically fit 375 people in this space. And that's often the case because the code mandated occupancy is going to be much higher than what you can actually fit in the space, what you want to fit in the space, or to Paul's point, how the parking calculations are done, because parking calculations many times, and this is much more his area than mine, but are much more based on the actual use and anticipated occupancy of the space. So again, I don't know exactly which sign you were looking at, but if it's an occupancy sign that's tied to the maximum building code occupancy, that doesn't necessarily have any relation to how the parking calculation was done or what the actual occupancy of the space could be.
Right. I think my point is that what we expected in what you indicated in those numbers that you gave us for projection of the parking, the numbers are much lower than what I'm visualizing as far as the number of tables, picnic tables outside, all the chairs and tables around the perimeter of the building. So I guess what my point is are we going to get one set of numbers on a plan that may be much lower than what the actual numbers are going to be? And that's where I'm worried about the extra 13 rooms. Yes, the 20,000 may be taking in some of the hallways, whatever, but you're also going to be adding intensity, which is, another 24 hotel rooms, which will allow for more people to be using all of the meeting rooms, et cetera, which, I mean, I want you to be successful. I don't want you to not have a successful business, of course, but I'm concerned again about the overflow into the neighborhoods, into the Rollins area, and just being more intense than this community can really handle. Already, we were maxed out as far as the look of that hotel being much greater than we wanted to have for that, or the parking lot, I should say. It's the parking lot that I'm really referring to. It's one thing to put it on paper and go, oh, it looks okay next to the road, blah, blah. And then bam, it goes up and all of a sudden the community is in, an outrage. How dare we? We're getting death threats about the parking garage all of a sudden. And it's like, yeah, we didn't think it was going to look so massive. So, I mean, as you look at these elevations of that new hotel, 20,000 spread out is a lot more bulk than not having that extra 20,000 spread out. And I know you're saying it's a little bit lower. That's nice, but it's still a lot bulkier of a facility for a small town feel. So I guess, there's all that put together. The fact that we just, I just want to put it in a perspective of a small town feel with the intensity being that much greater for our little tiny community. So it's from somebody who's living right down the street that I'm looking at this too. So you have to look at that. But thank you for answering it. But I'm sorry.
Greengold, we really have a choice here. They have an approved building permit for the previous design. So the question isn't whether we can change the whole design and reduce the intensity and whatever. The question is whether we will approve the change or whether they have the old design to go with, but they have an
Right,
approved
they do.
design.
That's right. But there is a larger dimension to the building. That's what I'm trying to say. There's a larger dimension to the building.
So you have a choice
Yeah.
which one you prefer.
So we don't have that choice, Larry, because I don't have
No,
the
wait,
plans of the old.
come, they have an approved
So-
building permit that they're asking for revision to. And
Right.
so I think we have not allowed the public to make any comments. I think it's time to listen to them if there's anyone that wants to comment on the design. So let me open it up to the public. Are there any comments? Greg Morris.
Good evening, everybody. I have some comments. Greg Morris, 2425 Woodland Court. Been a 22-year resident here. I've been following these things for a while, as a number of us have. Just some observations. That's certainly going to be wedding central there. We knew that with the original plan. I believe if the residents had a choice between weddings and people coming in and gambling, they would vote weddings. I've got a concern with perceived concern of mine with information timely making it to our planning and zoning. That is a great concern of mine. The residents are not in favor of expanded gambling in any capacity, although we can count on the state allowing expanded gambling. They are dependent on that money stream. Again, these are just some comments. General comment to our planning and zoning board. There have been some tremendous questions tonight. This is due diligence, which is important when all is said and done, that we've done our due diligence on all matters. When there are no questions, that bothers me a lot. So let's think about that. The comments regarding the comments regarding community changes due to any changes at the facility are, in my opinion, might be among the most important concerns. And on that, I'd recommend tabling voting on this at least a month. I know these plans sounds like these plans are freshly minted. I don't really have any, it's not really, just my personal opinion. They're within the footprint of the original plan, more or less, it looks like. The height's coming down, just from listening to the presentation tonight, which has been pretty well done by everyone involved. It seems that the owners have sacrificed a lot to gain that additional floor space inside. I know there's talk, and I know I'm counting on the state allowing the sports betting, which I'm going to guess is going to make its way here, an expanded floor space for gambling. And I guess I'm putting some words in the owner's mouths here a little bit, but that's okay. The sports betting, we probably need some floor space for that. But I think my main comments I wanted to leave everybody with was recommending tabling voting on this a month, just so that we can they can do a little bit of outreach, a little bit of retrospect. These things are part of due diligence. Let's see. Yeah, information making it to our planning and zoning members are really important to me. And when they're not asking questions, that bothers me a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Is there anyone else that would like to comment?
Hi, my name is Kelly Hahn, and I'm in Richfield Station. And I am frequently down in the Rollins parking lot, and there is a significant uptick in traffic, and I am concerned about the additional 20,000 square feet added to this new plan. I appreciate the questions that have been asked tonight, And I'm also concerned about the questions that two members didn't ask, considering that they've only had the plans for 6 days. And I agree with Mr. Morris that I think this should be tabled and not voted on tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to comment? All right, hearing none. Any final comments? Let me go around to my other commissioners and ask for wrap-up comments, if I could. First of all, Ms. Peralt.
Hi, yes, I wanted to add something.
Hello, who is this?
Hello, sir. This is Ken. I live in north of the resort.
Okay, Tim, go ahead. What's your comment?
I live right across the river. Okay, just bear with me. So I did have a two-part question. Two questions. The first one is, so the rooms are being moved closer to the bay. Is that correct? And I'm concerned because that blocks more of the view. That blocks more of the view, my view of the bay. And so that's my concern for the first one. It blocks my view from the bay. And then the second one, are you guys going to give us more perspective from the north side and the south side? Just so we could have a perspective of design, and we could go ahead from each side of the compass, south, east, west, north, all that. So I think that would help me out if we got that perspective. I wanted to share my concern. I saw the lights last night, and I noticed that there's a lot of harsh lighting from the parking lot. And so, and then there's 4 levels to it. So there's so much light now.
Tim, may I ask?
Especially in the stairways too.
From the rod and reel?
Can you repeat that again?
Tim, did you say you live across Fishing Creek from the rod and reel?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, you live in Windward Key.
I'm sorry, I can't hear that.
The townhouse is across from the rod and reel.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. Okay, and so you would like to see perspectives from the north, south, east, and west.
So, Jeremy, can you, okay, so there's the.
From where I live, yeah, it would be nice to see that.
So,
Okay, Jeremy, go back to the.
Yeah, so we have elevations of north, south, east, and west. So these are the 4, as you said, the cardinal points, directions, elevations, the perspectives that were completed.
That's strange because I don't see that.
Are you looking at the screen or not? Are you looking at my screen right now or no?
You know, specifically to the southeast. And I remember a few minutes ago, we had that perspective from the bridge.
This one.
261. And I wanted to ask the view from the bridge. And so I'm suggesting that maybe we could get the perspective from where we live on Fishing Creek.
This is almost from.
This is basically from across the creek, yeah.
So Yeah, it's in the townhouses. And so there's only 10 of us here. And so like the meeting, I could see it, but it's not good from the west side of Windward. And so the view that I have right now is from the east side of the townhouses.
The view that's on the screen right now?
The view that is on the screen right now would be the furthest west possible from Windward Key.
Right.
Further east would be more oriented.
Right, and I'm suggesting if you guys could give me a view of the other side.
It's already built.
Because I'm on the middle, from the middle of the road where I live.
Are you asking for?
I think that would be better.
Are you asking for a western view of the property across the way? A view of the garage?
Why don't you show the original design and the new design? That way we could see the perspective, so I could see how much of my view is going to be blocked of the bay.
So Jeremy, take the view to the two comparisons that shows in the very beginning that you showed the. Okay, so if you could expand that out a little, Jeremy. So on your left is the currently approved plan. Across to the area where Jeremy is going to put his, you can see the docks for the, or the piers for the, along Fishing Creek. You would be on the left across Fishing Creek, and that's what you would be looking at under the currently approved plan. That's a 5-story building that is right across from the perhaps the most western portion of Windward Key, but it's really more of the inlet. But it would be the most western portions of Windward Key, because the eastern portions of Windward Key are almost directly across from the rod and reel itself, which under the current plan is a 2-story building, although it's really a 1.5 stories because it's only one portion that's 2 stories. That's the portion that is to the south that Jeremy is taking the cursor around. So under the new plan, it shifts the 5-story building to the east, keeping that now at a 2-story, and the rod and reel would go up by 3 stories. So the end result is that you're at a lower height compared to the existing plan by around 9 feet. And so you can see from on the amended plan at the parking lot area is where you would be looking at from the west. But somebody at the street, they're not going to see any of that because at the street level, the garage completely blocks that. And it's probably going to block even the area where you would see the 4 stories of the hotel. That's just not going to get that high, because I've been on that bridge. You can't see the existing hotel from that portion of the roadway. You really just see 1936 and the garage. So from the east, which you're probably not worried about, is really where the bulk of the building is. And then from the south, it perhaps is the best way to look at it, is really from the southwest, which is our opening image, because from the immediate south, you're not really going to see anything other than the existing hotel. That is, your existing hotel is going to block most of your view of the 4-story building that would be built over top of the rod and reel, just like you can't now see the rod and reel from that angle. So the people in Chesapeake Station that currently see the existing hotel are not going to see much of a raising of a profile here. They would see much substantially more if we build the 5-story building under that plan, because it's offset more. That is, that it's no longer blocked by the existing hotel. So under the new plan that you see on the right, the building masses that are taller are all put together. And so it lowers the overall threshold of the impact of height and the size and scope of the project. It just makes them more cohesive so that it's all together. Whereas the 5-story building being more diagonally separated with the atrium in between increased the overall look of the size of the building. Under that currently approved plan that you see there on the left, it's hard to appreciate just how high under that plan, because it's so crunched together, how high that 5-story building would be. But it goes 70 feet, which is the maximum, up to the roof line. And then you also have the stair tower and the roof deck on top of the building. So under the current plan, there's use on the very top of the 5-story building. Whereas now, all that's getting removed. So Jeremy's now drawing an approximate block of where the 5-story building would be on this rendering. And I think that would help you understand just how the mass of the sizing of this building has actually been substantially decreased from the external perspective, even though you're keeping the base property lines the same. That is, the building envelopes are all identical or slightly smaller, like on the atrium, the eastern wall gets pulled in a few feet. I think it's about 8 feet, 6 feet, Jeremy. So the atrium on that side actually pulls away from the bay. So most of the increase in square footage is really just taking up the space, as Jeremy described it, the interstitial spaces between buildings. The overall massing of the building from the outside perspective is going to be the same. So your views are actually going to be improved. They will be slightly adjusted eastward, that's true.
Okay, can we move on? Is there anyone else that would like to make a public comment? All right. So we started to go around the commissioners. Commissioner Baralt, I didn't hear from you. Do you have any comments, final comments you'd like to make?
Yeah. My final comment is I certainly understand the difference between the 5 stories in the original and the amended, and the 5 stories is incredibly high, and I wonder, is in reference to the parking garage, are they of equal height? But there's no doubt about it, this is a compound, and whether it's the addition of 13 rooms or 14 rooms, I appreciate it being spread out with the addition of the 20,000 square feet, but I'm shocked by, and I didn't know the specifics, but when Mr. Donovan spoke about currently there are 70 weddings per year and that's gonna now go to 150. That really puts it in perspective, and there is going to be an impact on the community. There's no doubt about it. Because those large or small wedding, if they can't park in the garage or they need to go to the store to get a present right before they go into the wedding, they're going to Roland's. It's really going to have an impact for us. And that small town field, I don't know how we're going to hold on to that with this compound. But I just want to say that I agree with postponing a vote until we can look more specifically at the information.
So can I respond to that, Ms. Kathleen? And all due respect to your comments, when you go from 70, which is the most we've ever done, and we haven't done that for several years, the goal of 150 is a beautiful thing when you spread it amongst 12 months. You have to understand we do hardly any weddings in the shoulder season, which is in the fall and winter. So if we could maintain the same number of weddings that say we do in June, maybe in January or February, it's tough. 42% of all weddings occur in the 6 months that are the off months. In the warmer months, you do 58% of the weddings. So the parking would be completely spread out and under control. And I would really like to plead to all of you to please let common sense prevail. I realize you hate, or some people in town have very strong feelings about the garage. And for the record, I respect all those feelings. But also for the record, I want everybody on this board to know that is the reason for 1936, to hide the garage. That's the reason for the elevated walkway, to try to beautify it. And then when you come around with the lighting and with the screens, it was all to try to blend in, because we do have the business here, and we're all for the small town charm. We're a big part of it. We want to stay a part of it. The fact that we already have an approved plan, we're just trying to make it better with this amended plan. But I would ask that you really consider letting us get the foundation going. You know, this thing's been going on for quite a while. What good is a month going to do you? And I apologize to you if you didn't get it 30 days in advance or 15 days, whatever you wanted in advance. But frankly, we have a great professional team we've put together here that's made a professional presentation. We had nothing to do when you got the plan. And I think Mr. Jakubiak is well respected and all around the state for his work. So if there was something wrong, he'd be recommending against us. I mean, we have the approved plan. I would ask for your consideration to, give us the benefit of the doubt here. Another month and the cost keeps going on. We want to get started.
Well,
it's not a
with all due respect, Mr. Donovan, I also, maybe 150 is pie in the sky, but I certainly don't believe that you're not going to try to work toward that goal. And as word of mouth and you advertise about the banquet and the conference center, I think you're going to see an uptick in those weddings, because otherwise, why would you build to that capacity? So I think with all due respect, I think my comment is a fair assessment. And lastly, I just want to say, right, I understand you want to go full throttle with this, but as somebody who's lived in this community for 21 years, the parking garage was a total surprise. and maybe you had approval for that, but it was horrifying for town residents to finally see the realization of that, because it has changed the whole feel of this town. So, you know, you held on for 2 years to your gaming room, and then they finally convinced you to change. So perhaps a month isn't a lot, and maybe we need more time, but I think we're just trying to make this as plausible as possible, given the fact that you have an approved plan.
Mr. Brown, I would like to call for the question.
Well, before you.
You're asking.
I haven't finished my
I would like to call
presentation.
for the question. I think we've had enough discussion on it. I think we need to call for the question.
All right, go ahead, Commissioner Greengold.
Well, the question is whether to approve the amended version of the rod and reel properties, Lot 1 and Residue Tract 1.
Right, revision 1 and revision 2.
Yes.
Respectfully, Mr. Chairman Brown and Commissioner Greengold, we haven't even finished our presentation yet. We've got.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Presentation on the signs, and I'd like to.
Well, it was 9 o'clock, and Mr. Brown said he was going to end the meeting at 9 o'clock, so I don't know.
No, we will keep going until the presentations are certainly completed and we get to some resolution on this issue.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Blitz, go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No problem. So before I turn to the sign amendments that were also a part of the request for the amendment plan, let me focus the commission on what I think is critically important. The site plan approval process is a legal process that does the administrative check on whether it complies with the zoning ordinance. You've heard from your zoning administrator, and I will tell you that we've done all the things necessary to make this plan comply with the current zoning ordinance. That is really all this is about. This isn't about whether you like the garage or not. This isn't about a lot of the things that have been talked about. The legal standard is, does the site plan meet the requirements of the law? And you've heard from your zoning administrator does. We can answer any specific questions you have with respect to compliance with the law, but that's got to be the orientation and the focus. We provide the aesthetics to help you understand what would be built, but you don't have the authority or the standards in your zoning ordinance to make judgments about the aesthetics of the building. That's just not part of the site plan process. I think this is a far superior presentation to the one that's already planned and approved and that we can build right now. So I think what you really need to look at, and what we've tried to focus on, is understanding that the currently approved plan on the left can be built. We think we get a better result for everybody, a lower profile of the buildings, within the same space for this amended plan. And it's really, I mean, quite frankly, almost entirely a change in the occupancy, the design of the occupancy of the internal uses. And as the parking chart that's attached to the plan on the site plan shows, we actually decreased the parking requirement by a few spots. That's under your ordinance. So, and even now the garage can remain largely empty. I think many of the problems that you experienced during construction is, especially when I heard comments about the impacts on Rollins, you have to understand we didn't have the occupancy permit to use the garage as it was being built. And so the Donovans and the Rod and Reel were running the 24/7 shuttles to maintain the business that was going to pay for all this. And there was probably some impacts along Mears Avenue and into Rollins, but now with the garage, there really shouldn't be those impacts. So what I'd like to shift you to is two requests to the sign program. Now, under the current plan, the signs are regulated on a site-wide basis. And Jeremy already showed you the signs that are the minor adjustments to the, yeah, if you could take them to that, to the sign plan for the tenant ID signs around the buildings. So those are basically similar in size and scope to what had already been approved, and we're really not focusing you on that. They are moved in certain areas. Well, on that view right there, you've got the signs that are now hanging down underneath the areas with the nice arches. That wasn't part of the plan because those arches weren't that designed there, but they were still tenant ID signs. And you have the main entrance sign along at the entrance to the atrium, which is called the porte cochere. That sign is basically the same size, but what we'd like you to consider is if you could change the share of the screen so that I can share my screen. I will take you to the existing approved plan. Okay, so what I'm showing you now, and I'd ask to confirm that you all can see the elevation of the garage. Did it work?
Yes, it worked here.
Okay, I just want to make sure everybody's hearing. So our first proposal is under the current plan, there are to be, I think it's 13 total banners that hang down along the garage that are lit. These are the seasonal banners. We're going to suggest that we remove the banners, which, there's 10 of them that are 13 by 7 for 51 square feet. And then I believe there's there's 4 of them that are 3 by 12, 36 feet. Remove those and replace them with simple flags on the top of the cornices. So here's the cornices that I'm referring to. On each stair tower, you've got a little roof, and there would be a pole with a 3 by 5 or a 4 by 6 flag. We're proposing 4 by 6 flags for the garage and 3 by 5 flags on top of the 2-story building and the 1936 for a total of 6 flags. They would be much smaller and less light. We've heard people talk about lighting on the garage. Well, this part of the lighting hasn't even been finished. You can see the art screens, but along these stair towers are the changeable banners. They're also supposed to be lit. This is the south elevation. So this is looking from Mears Avenue. And there was to be 4 of those banners. I'll take you now to the east elevation. So this is looking from the rod and reel towards the garage. There were 151 square foot banner here, and then a 36 square foot banner here in this corner. Then on the north elevation, which is people looking from the creek or Windward Key, really mostly creek, you've got 3 banners. And these 2 are the shorter ones that are 36 square feet, and these are the 51 square. And then finally on the west elevation, this is looking from Bayside Road towards the garage and 1936, you've got 4 banners. So instead of those 4 banners, which, let me look it up, was a total of 654 square feet under the signs, the flags are only going to be 126 square feet. So it's a substantially lower thing. The flags would be various types of local and historic flags, the Maryland flag, the Chesapeake Beachtown flag, the Calvert County flag. That's the idea here. So we were proposing 4 flags on the corners of the garage, of the, so on each stair tower is a corner roof. One on the top of the cupola of 1936, and then one on the, where the pool is, there's a little building that has a little roof like this, and it'd be on that. The two on 1936 and the new building, the 2-story building, would be 3x5 flags. Let me make sure I got that right. Yes, 3x5 flags on 6-foot high poles. So they're not going to be terribly high. The 4 flags on the garage would be 4 foot by 6 foot on 8-foot poles. They have to be a certain dimension so that as the wind dies down and they're not dragging on the ground. And so the first thing we would ask you to consider is the replacement of those banners with simple flags on the top. I'm gonna, I think one of the renderings had shown a little flag, but you probably didn't even notice it because it's so small. You know, a 3x5 is not going to be a big flag. So that's the first thing. Then the second request is a change in the way we approach 1936's signs. So what you're looking at now is the tenant ID sign on the west elevation, which is looking from Bayside at 1936 in the garage. And that's one approved sign, is a 4x8 sign, 32 square feet. And that sign has been placed there, and I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. And let's see, the existing, that's the north, and let me go to the, sorry with this Zoom, I'm not really, okay, so here is what it looks, is the other sign, same size, 4x8, 32 square feet, that is supposed to hang off of the balcony. That has not yet been installed. Both are indirectly illuminated signs. These are already approved. So these areas in blue are what we're seeking to replace by removing both of those signs and replacing it with one sign on the that would hang off the corner of the garage. And the principal reason for that is nobody in the world is going to really see this sign. It's too low relative to the road, and it's too, it just shows to Fishing Creek, and it blocks people's views from the inside. So it just doesn't make sense. I can explain the way we got here. The original proposal was for a sign to be on the roof, basically hiding the HVAC units, but from feedback from the commission, they didn't want a sign on the roof. So we pulled them down, put them here and on that western elevation on the other side, and that got the two 1936 signs. So let me show you what that kind of looks like. So right now, this is 1936 restaurant, and where you would have the 4x8 sign would be right here. So I was actually wrong. You can see that from the road. Would go there. And then the western elevation, which has been installed but made smaller than is allowed, was the 1936 bar and grill sign. The problem is that really can't be seen at all from the road, and it's so inset into the 1936 that it's difficult to see and just doesn't work as a tenant ID sign. And when I say tenant ID, 1936 isn't a separate tenant, it's just what we call the kinds of signs that are associated with the use. So it's announcing what 1936 is. So what we propose is to remove both of those approved signs at 64 square feet with one sign that goes off that hangs off of the column, and it would look like this. We've provided you with two options. We really want the 41 square foot sign because we want people to be able to read it from a distance as they're driving along. We don't think this smaller version is going to actually read that well, and that's what the sign company is telling us. This is a little bit too small. But even at one sign, this is 41. This is a reduction at the larger sign is a reduction of 22 square feet of the from the currently approved sign. Now, the way that would hang would be off of this column. Ignore this crab that was just provided by the sign guy as an idea. We're not doing that, but he had created this box to show the measurement. So this would be a version of the larger sign. It would replace the sign that's supposed to go here and the one that would be out on this side. And we would just have one sign hanging off of the corner column of this stair tower of the garage announcing 1936. This is a view from basically as you're driving south on Bayside. This is the smaller version, and as you can see, you start to lose the fidelity of what that sign shows. That's 12 feet high. The total square footage there was 31.5 square feet, which is almost half of what the existing sign approval allows. So these are a classier, we think, classier presentation of the signs. It makes it more visible. It's still a substantial distance away from the road. That is, there's a lot of space between this corner and the side of the road. So it's not going to be confused with any form of traffic control device. But it allows you to get a view of the signage for the restaurant from the views, whereas right now, you really just can't see the signs. This is the one that's been put up to demonstrate that. And if we have to live with that sign, that's what it will be, but it's really not serving the function of a tenant ID sign. And it really just, you can't even see what it's doing, what it's saying. So we really think that what I refer to as the barbershop style of a sign hanging off this column is a far preferable approach. It's a decrease in the total square footage of signage that we have already approved for 1936. And so we would ask you to consider that as well. And do you have any questions about the signs on either the flags or with the removal of the banners or the 1936 sign?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Blitz. Let's see. Let's do a quick round robin here with the commissioners and see if there are any comments on the signage. First, Ms. Peralt.
I don't like the new sign. I think it further obstructs. It's another addition to blocking and just being more prominent. So I would prefer the larger one that is less obvious.
Okay, Mr. Larson.
I go along with the proposal. The larger sign hanging, it works for me.
Okay, Mr. Evans, any comments?
Yeah, I also like option A, but I did have two questions. My first one is, will these signs be illuminated?
Yes, not the indirect illumination, just like the current approval. So it's a light shining up, probably from below off the column up onto either side of the sign.
Okay, but it won't be like a LED, like a
no, this
bright
is
white light.
No, it is a wood sign, indirectly illuminated only.
Okay, and my other question is, you said you were going to remove the banners of like the lady in the swimsuit and those banners.
No, those are not these are banners that have yet to be installed.
Okay.
So these are banners. So when you were talking about the lady, let me go to that east elevation. Oh, that's existing. Okay.
Maybe your photographs would show it.
Okay, yeah.
Well,
see.
this is where the two art screens from the east of the two ladies are.
Yeah.
So these are the banners that are the seasonal banners that we're seeking to take out from the plan and not put those up. So those haven't even been installed yet
Okay, so you're gonna put the flags on those.
on these rooftops.
Yeah. Okay.
So the large murals stay. There's no.
Yes, I mean, the murals, you know, as Gerald mentioned, you know, very expensive way of making this garage historically contextual and beautifying it. I mean, it's a very expensive process to do those art screens, and it's all original artwork. So, you know, nobody likes the idea or a garage, a view of a garage, but I think this is one of the nicer looking garages you'll see, just because so much work has been done to make it prettier. And one of the reasons why we thought getting rid of these banners and replacing them with flags is it makes it a little less demonstrative and a little more contextually fitting with the community.
Thank you. And Ms. Greengold.
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry.
Yes.
The flags, first of all, would draw our eyes right to the parking lot. That's what they do. They flap and make you look right at it. So I think that's not a good way to mitigate the boldness of that parking garage. But I'm also concerned that with many flags, you have to light them. If it's an American flag, you have to maintain them constantly. And I'm concerned that the wind will rip them up and they're going to look, you know, not very sad very quickly. I would propose that you make the 3 pole flag, the flags on poles right down in the front by the atrium. I mean, make that as a presentation instead of having to put these little circus. It would look like a circus, having little flags on top of these little roofs. I think it would look really silly, and they would be small flags compared to this big structure. So I think it would be out of proportion, and it just wouldn't be appropriate. Now, going back to, so that's my opinion about those flags. But I like patriotic flags like we have on Richfield Station if you want to put them on standard poles in the ground. So I would be okay with that. But going back to the 1936, are we taking down that big 1936 green sign that's up there right now? Are we taking that down?
Yes, the proposal is to not put up the second one, take down this one that has been put up, and just have one sign.
She's talking about the Christmas decoration. That'll be down the first week.
No, I'm talking about that big, I think it's green. It says 1936 on it, and it's up almost all by the roof.
Yeah, that was only put up for Christmas. That'll be down the first week of January.
No, it's not a Christmas decoration. It says 1936 on
We
it.
considered it to be a green sign that was just for Christmas.
You're talking about a lit sign? Yes, that was just a Christmas decoration that got put up with all the rest of the Christmas decoration.
Oh, that's not a sign. Oh,
No.
it is located right by the utilities up there, in fact, those are the utilities, Chris, that I was referring to that were not screened. So those need to be screened at some point, and they should have been screened already. But those, that sign is up there, so that's why I thought it was more of a permanent sign. Okay. So going back to the sign that is out from the building, why can't we put it against the building instead of putting it out in the roadway? Is there no way to put that along the building anywhere for ID? That was the original idea, was to put it on the wall, not sticking out into the roadway.
Well, that's where it is right now. That is, it's on the wall. The problem is this wall is inset. So from either direction, you really don't see that. The only people that really can see this sign and read it are the people that are immediately adjacent to 1936 and basically stopped. Because if you're driving by, you can't see that at all.
So this sign that you want to protrude out, what are the exact dimensions? You have two different sizes. I can't, it's so little here, I can't read it's, so you have a 31 by 31 inches. So you have 3 feet by
146, which is basically 12 feet, 11 foot.
12 feet. So 3 feet by 12 feet, which is pretty significant within itself. So if you're gonna do anything, it should be the smaller one, because the larger one is how large? The larger one is 3 feet by
35 inches by 168, which is 14 feet. So it's really a 14
14 feet is huge. 40 feet long is a huge sign. That's almost 2 stories tall for 14 feet. That's 2 stories.
Well, the banners that we're taking down are 17 feet long. So.
Well, they're next to those murals you have, that would really look tacky to have those banners. I agree there, but you don't want to have a sign that's two stories tall. So if you're going to have a sign, it would have to be the B to make it look more pleasing than having a huge. Yeah, that's, I mean, why would you want to have something so huge like that? That just is so tacky in a small town atmosphere. You just don't need it. We're all going to know it's 1936. Everybody can see 1936. You don't need a large 14-foot high sign. Look how it is next to that street light. It's it's almost as tall as a street light, for crying out loud. I don't think.
I think some Miss Blackwelder, you have comments? Commissioner Blackwelder.
Can't hear you, Laura. No, still can't hear you.
All right.
He has to unmute, I think. No.
Mr. Evans, you commented? All right. So we have 5 commissioners on.
Oh, Lori's back now. Lori came back.
And is there any public comment on the signs?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
You can?
Yeah.
Can anybody else?
Yeah, I hear you.
Commissioner Blackwelder, go ahead.
Sorry. So on the signs, I'll just be real quick. I think it was a good decision to remove those flags. I think they do compete with those other artwork things. And I think the sign would look good on the wall, like Cindy said. And as far as public flags go, I don't like that idea of having public flags, because then we're going to get into which businesses do they belong on and where can we put them. So I would prefer that any flags be kind of germane to the business. I don't want to be stuck deciding whether we should put an American flag on a cannabis shop or something like that. So I would prefer that we just avoid public flags on on business buildings. And that's my comment on signs.
And just so everybody understands, there's no intention of putting an American flag on it because we're not lighting them, and that has to be lit.
Okay, I have a comment. Hi there, this is Ken, and I have a comment. One thing I noticed, if you look at the mural, inside the mural, you'll see that there is a flag on the rooftop. And I would suggest, I would think it would bring history back to life if we go ahead and have that copied. Basically, put the flag at the same location as it is in the mural. It would bring that history back to life.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. Is anyone else? All right.
I have one more comment.
I think we need to move on. Is there, Mr. Blitz, is there any other presentations you have?
No, just in conclusion that I know that with respect to the building design changes, everybody expresses concerns. We sent this package over in, I believe, November 17th. So it's been with the town for a long time. It may have only been published to the website in the past 10 days, but I think the commission's had it. At least I hope they have. And time really is of the essence. We viewed this as relatively minor change. In fact, other than the fact that the building mass was moving, the site plan itself is not changing. That is, the calculations that are done for critical area, there's no greater requirements under that. We far exceed our mitigation requirement because we're treating an acre and a half of public space under the bioretention system. So our mitigation still far exceeds the required mitigation under this site. So this is a very environmentally conscious design. It always has been. Along the water, in between the garage and the bulkhead, are very sophisticated bioretention facilities that have planned critical area plantings and other stuff. But what they do is capture stormwater and remove nitrogen and phosphate going into the bay. So those things we don't, were all a big part of the presentation when we did the original presentation. I understand that many of the members of the commission weren't on the commission at that time, and so they didn't have the experience of going through that. But we did a number of hearings, I believe 2 or 3 nights worth of hearings on that, and there was a big traffic study that showed that the capacities were met, and all the lighting was done, full review. So to say that we haven't done a full legal review, all of this programming, all of the site work for the project has been thoroughly vetted and is compliant with the Chesapeake Beach zoning ordinance. And that's the standard by which you evaluate site plan. If you have specific questions about compliance with respect to the site plan, that's the bigger document that came from Paul Woodburn that has all of the drawings of the things. A lot of this stuff about the architecture and the design of the buildings really just aren't a part of the site plan review. If we were talking about questions of public access or access ways or how the people are going to move and life safety, those would all be concerns that we're ready to address if you've got them. But the outward presentation of this building reorients the internal space on the same envelope and keeps us going. I really would ask that you consider voting on this tonight. Another month isn't going to change any of the information that you get or your ability to evaluate the legal standards for a site plan review. And we really need to keep the Calvert County permitting process started so that foundation work can continue. We've already started the southwest wall, completed the southwest wall of the building that would be the 5-story. It gets reused as the southwest wall of the 2nd story. We did that because we have the permit to go ahead and build it. But in the process of this, the COVID came along, slowed down the commencement of the full build out of phase 2. We basically stopped at the southwest wall and the electric room and looked to improve the design while we had that space. And I think we've improved the design of the building. That's really not any impact on the site plan. And that's what we're here about. So I'd end there and ask for your approval of this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Litz. Mr. Jakubiak, can I ask you for one final comment? Are you aware of any code issues related to either of these revisions that have been requested?
No, the proposals meet the zoning standards as written. And there's been a lot of discussions about the occupancies for parking. They all square up, just like I said in the staff report. This project does not impose any additional burdens on area traffic, and we can't go back and change the plan that the Planning Commission approved, which at the time was actually approved according to the standards in the zoning ordinance as well. This ordinance meets the zoning ordinance, and Mr. Blitz is right. And I would advise the Planning Commission, if you seek to approve or disapprove this project, that you do it for a principled reason that's drawn specifically from the zoning ordinance, that you not disapprove it because you're concerned about its look, or that it's causing traffic, or that you don't like the garage, or all the other issues that were brought up, which are very valid concerns. I mean, obviously, they're very valid community concerns, but site plan review is a very specific administrative task that you're charged with. And it's not one that we can take lightly, or we can't divert too far. We've talked a lot about developing design standards and the like, but we don't have those now. We don't have site view standards, and we don't have a lot of the other things that the Planning Commission would like to have. So we have to rely on the code as written and do our best with what we have. I would like to say, though, that this project is a vast improvement over the one that was approved. The massing of this building is a far improved. The shifting of the space, the aggregation of this building into a smaller mass bulk is a really good advantage for this whole community. You as Planning Commission, we're even talking about tonight lowering the building heights to 35 feet around the entire town. And here's a project that actually brings down the building height, which is an objective that you have said you wanted to see addressed. So I would say that on its face, this is a project that squares with the zoning ordinance completely, and actually results in a better massing and diagram and building design. And for that, we should be thankful. If there are specific concerns about building design, I have to unfortunately mention that we don't have design standards, and we don't have a basis for judging whether the building meets a code standard, because we don't have a code standard.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. My comments. The issue before us is to decide whether the existing permitted plan goes forward, or whether the revised plan is approved and goes forward. As our administrator has said, there are no code violations or code issues involved here. And that's what's really before this commission. The comprehensive plan that was approved in 2010, this is not inconsistent with that plan, which is the existing plan, the one we have to operate under until it is changed. So from my point of view, I will support approval of this plan. Now, we have 6 commissioners. I will make a motion here shortly to approve the 2 revisions that have been proposed. If the vote, obviously, if it's approved, then it's approved. If the vote were to come out 3-3, then we will reconsider it in January. And if it's 4-2 or 5-1 or whatever, then we won't consider it in January. So with that, I make a motion, and as I understand it, one more question, Mr. Jakubiak, there are no provisions that need to be added to this. Is that correct?
No, there are no conditions because the project still complies with all the various agency approvals that they need to get. If you were to approve this, then I would amend the zoning permit that they're operating under now to reflect your approval tonight. And the county Department of Inspections and Permits would then accept a new set of building plans and begin the laborious task of reviewing those and signing off on them. So there are no typical conditions that we would normally put on a plan like this.
Okay. I make a motion that we approve the request to revise the plan as made by the Rod and Reel Corporation. Let's go around the room, maybe start with Ms. Peralt. You vote aye or no?
I vote aye.
We have one aye. Mr. Evans?
Yeah, I also vote aye, based on the fact that it's actually gonna lower the height. I think that was a big plus, based on what we're trying to do, and that it's level with the existing hotel. I think it's a better design in general. So I will vote aye.
Can we have a round of discussion?
Mr. Larson.
I vote aye as well. I think it's aesthetically more pleasing. It seems like a more efficient use of the space. Yeah, I think it's an improvement.
And Ms. Greengold
I vote no.
votes no. And Ms. Blackwelder,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I vote no, but I would prefer to table this. We did not receive these plans until six days prior to this meeting. Nobody's been able to evaluate all the information that we just received on occupancy.
Oh, that's a second question.
Like a
that
motion to table.
we as the commission need to consider. As I understand, I've counted it, there were 4 ayes and 2 noes. So the revisions are approved by the commission. Mr. Blitz?
Thank you for the commission and all the time that you've put into this. We will endeavor to proceed as quickly with Calvert County Building Code Review. We've had a lot of conversations with them. You know, as Mr. Donovan described, it takes 10 to 11 months to build a 2-story building and 16 months for the rest of it. That's a long time, a lot of effort, and the sooner we can get started, the sooner we can finish. And I think by the time you get done, you'll see a resort property that is very is a strong asset for the community. And thank you to the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Bliss. Okay, that concludes the portion of the meeting on the Rod and Reel's plan. As I said in the agenda, I intended to make a motion at 9 p.m. to adjourn. I'll make that motion now. If enough commissioners want to continue on, I'm happy to continue on. It doesn't bother me, but I did make a commitment to make the motion, and we are 1 hour late making that a motion. So going around the room, Ms. Peralt, do you want to continue or do you want to adjourn?
I vote to adjourn.
Mr. Evans?
Also vote to adjourn, but I would like to ask when we would proceed with the rest of the agenda.
We'll add it to the next meeting.
Okay. That's the short-term rental discussion, correct?
Then we either continue or we don't. And so we have 2 to adjourn. Mr.
Yeah, I'll adjourn.
Ms. Blackwelder?
I'll adjourn.
And Ms. Greengold.
Sure.
Okay, so the motion passes to adjourn. Thank you very much. We have, I have a number of things I wanted to talk about, but it's a late.
Can I make one public comment? I've been sitting here for 3 hours waiting patiently about the short-term rentals. Can we make sure that does I was directed to Planning and Zoning by Mayor Mahoney at the last town council meeting, saying that this was the proper forum, and I've been sitting here for 3 hours waiting to voice my opinion and hear what you guys had to say about it. Can we make sure that this does happen at the beginning of the next meeting?
It will be the first item on the next meeting. Could you, would you mind giving me your name and contact information? Because I'd like
Sure.
to make sure you're at the next meeting.
Absolutely, I would appreciate that. My name is Shad Montague. It's S-H-A-D, and the last name is Montague. It's M-O-N-T-A-G-U-E. And
Okay,
you want my email? My email is my name at gmail.com. shadmontague@gmail.com.
Okay, and it's SHADMONTAGU@gmail.com.
There's an E at the end of that, M-O-N-T-A-G-U-E.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Would you be interested in making a presentation at the next meeting?
Yes, definitely, we could do that.
All right. Well, I'll be in contact.
All right, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you for your patience. All right. Thank you very much. We will see you at the next meeting, January 27th.
All right.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas.
Happy
Yep.
holidays.
Merry Christmas.
Good night.
Merry Christmas. Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Merry Christmas.